Okay, so picture this. It's 1945. The end of World War II is, in sight. And this ship, the USS Indianapolis, has just finished this, like, top secret mission. But instead of getting a hero's welcome, the ship and its crew, they face this, like, really terrifying fate. Only 316 out of, get this, 1,195 men survived. I mean, that's the kind of story that, like, really stays with you, right? Yeah. And that's just one of the, fascinating and sometimes, tragic tales we're diving into today. You also sent over some information about a shooting scandal in 1950s high society, right? The story of Ann Woodward.
Yeah, it is interesting that you picked these two stories. They seem so different, like on the surface,
Right.
But they both grapple with this weight of social pressure, ambition, and the pursuit of acceptance, sometimes with, devastating consequences.
Yeah. And for those of you listening who are, like, in the 45 to 60 age range, the USS Indianapolis might, like, ring a bell. Remember that chilling shark attack scene in Jaws?
Yeah.
Well, that was inspired by the real-life ordeal faced by the survivors of this ship. But today, we're going, beyond Hollywood and uncovering the true depth of these events.
Absolutely. Let's start with Ann Woodward. Imagine trying to break into the elite social circles of, like, 1950s New York. Think Vanderbilts, Astors, the whole upper crust. It wasn't just about money. It was a whole system of, like, rules and expectations.
And originally Angeline Crowell from Kansas was determined to, make it in this world. She even changed her name to Ann Eden. It's kind of like shedding her old life and stepping into a new persona. It really makes you think about, like, how far someone might go to fit in, doesn't it?
Yeah. It speaks volumes about the allure and perhaps the illusion of acceptance. But you're right. Her transformation went beyond just, like, a new name. She learned the social graces, adopted the fashion, and even married into one of these prominent families, becoming the wife of William Woodward Jr., heir to a, banking fortune.
But wasn't exactly a fairy tale, was it? Her ambition didn't exactly win over everyone in this, like, tight-knit world.
No, not really. She faced quite a bit of resistance, actually. Some of these established families, they saw her as, like, an outsider, a social climber, trying, force her way in. We even see this reflected in this rather cruel acronym they used, NOD, which stood for Not Our Class, Dear. It's a stark reminder of how deeply entrenched these social hierarchies were.
Wow. And even within her marriage, there seems to have been a clash of expectations. Bill Woodward. Yeah. Though initially drawn to Anne's, like, vibrant personality, later seemed to want her to, conform to the more traditional role of a society wife.
It's that age-old tension between wanting someone for who they are and then trying to fit them into, like, a predetermined mold.
Yeah. And then you add another layer to this whole story, a series of break-ins on Long Island. They call them the Prowler incidents. These burglaries were, like, terrorizing the wealthy communities, and the Woodwards, like many others, were on edge. They even started sleeping with loaded shotguns by their beds.
It created this atmosphere of, like, fear and paranoia, which undoubtedly added to the, already existing tension in their relationship.
And this all culminated in a truly tragic event on the night of October 30th, 1955, after this party for the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Anne heard noises downstairs. She grabs her shotgun, sees a figure in the hallway, and fires. Not once, but twice. But it wasn't an intruder. It was her husband, Billy.
It's a chilling reminder that even in a world of, privilege and luxury, tragedy can strike so, like, unexpectedly.
Now, here's where things get really complex. Anne was cleared by a grand jury, meaning they didn't find enough evidence to, put her on trial for murder. And later, the actual prowler was caught. And he even confessed to being at the Woodwards' house that night. But despite all this, Anne was, like, ostracized by society.
This wasn't just a legal case. It became, like, a social trial. A grand jury only decides if there's enough evidence for a trial, not whether someone is innocent or guilty in the, eyes of society. The court of public opinion can be much harsher, especially within these closed circles.
And one of Anne's most vocal critics was the writer Truman Capote. You probably know him. He nicknamed her Mrs. Bang Bang, and even planned to write a book based on the incident, thinly veiled as fiction. But portraying her as, like, a cold-blooded murderer. Imagine the sting of that betrayal. Especially given to someone she considered, like, a friend.
It really highlights the fickle nature of social connections and the lasting damage that rumors and judgment can inflict.
It's heartbreaking. When Anne found out about Capote's plans, she was devastated. Tragically, she took her own life, leaving behind this note, "Don't forget Ann Woodward." It's almost like she was trying to reclaim her narrative, even in her final moments.
It's a poignant ending to a story filled with, ambition, like social pressure, and the devastating consequences of relentless judgment.
Yeah, it's a story that really makes you think about the price of ambition, and the sometimes suffocating nature of social expectations. But, shifting gears a bit, that article you shared about the USS Indianapolis, right? That's a completely different kind of tragedy, isn't it? A story of heroism, survival against incredible odds, but also a stark reminder of how quickly things can, go wrong, even in the midst of victory.
Yeah, it really is. It's a powerful reminder that even in moments of triumph, there can be these underlying tragedies, these stories that don't always make the, headlines. And the sinking of the USS Indianapolis, that's one of those stories that deserves to be remembered, not just for the disaster itself, but for what it reveals about, human resilience and the fight for justice.
Right. And for anyone listening who remembers that movie Jaws, you might recall Quint's chilling monologue about the Indianapolis. It's a fictionalized account, sure, but it captures the raw terror of what those sailors faced in the water.
Yeah.
And at those real-life events, the events that, inspired that scene that we're going to uncover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's July 1945, just weeks before the, end of World War II. The USS Indianapolis has just completed this highly classified mission, delivering components for the atomic bomb, Little Boy, the one that would later be dropped on Hiroshima. It was a mission so secret that even the ship's captain, Charles B. McVay III, didn't even know the full extent of what he was carrying.
Can you imagine the weight of that responsibility? Sailing across the Pacific with this, incredibly powerful weapon, not fully knowing what it was, or the impact it would have?
It's it's incredible. It speaks to the level of secrecy surrounding the Manhattan Projects, the effort to, develop the atomic bomb. And for the crew of the Indianapolis, this secrecy would ultimately contribute to their tragic fate.
So the delivery goes, smoothly, but on the return journey, disaster strikes. In the middle of the night, this Japanese submarine, the I-58, fires 6 torpedoes, 2 hit the Indianapolis, causing massive damage. And here's the thing. This wasn't a slow, agonizing sinking. The ship went down in just 12 minutes.
Yeah, think about that for a moment. 12 minutes.
Yeah.
From a, functioning warship to underwater wreckage, the chaos, the panic, the sheer terror of those final moments. It's almost unimaginable.
And out of the nearly 1,200 men on board, around 900 managed to, escape the sinking ship. But they find themselves stranded in the open ocean with limited supplies, clinging to life rafts and whatever debris they can find. And here's where those Navy missteps you mentioned earlier come into play.
Right, because in the interest of, secrecy, the Navy wasn't tracking the Indianapolis's position. And despite Captain McVeigh's request for an escort, which was standard procedure for a ship on, such a vital mission, they didn't provide one. It was a series of errors that would have devastating consequences.
Like those men were, left to fend for themselves, abandoned in the vastness of the Pacific and the days that followed.
Yeah.
Those were a true test of human endurance, dehydration, starvation, exposure to the elements. These were just some of the challenges they faced.
And then there were the sharks, drawn by the scent of, blood and the commotion in the water. They began to circle the survivors. It's a chilling echo of that scene in Jaws, sure. But in this case, it was a horrifying reality for those men.
Can you imagine watching your, comrades disappear beneath the waves, knowing there was nothing you could do to, stop it? The psychological toll alone must have been unbearable.
Absolutely. It wasn't just the physical hardships. It was the mental strain of knowing that help wasn't coming, the constant fear, the dwindling hope. It's a testament to their resilience that anyone survived at all.
They found ways to, help each other stay afloat, taking turns sleeping, so someone was always, on watch. They even share this single crate of rotten potatoes that they managed to salvage. It's hard to fathom how they endured such, conditions for so long.
It speaks to the power of, human connection.
Yeah.
The will to survive, even when faced with, unimaginable horrors.
Finally, after 4 agonizing days, a pilot on a routine patrol spotted the survivors. Purely by chance. Rescue efforts were, launched immediately. But of those 900 men who went into the water, only 316 were pulled out alive. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of this tragedy.
And a reminder that the tragedy went beyond, the sinking itself. The Navy, eager to, deflect blame and protect their image. They decided to scapegoat Captain McVeigh. He was court-martialed. becoming the only captain in U.S. naval history to be convicted for losing his ship in wartime.
It's like they needed someone to, like, blame some people
Yeah.
responsible for this, terrible loss. But as we've seen, there were so many factors
Yeah.
that contributed to the sinking. So many errors made at, higher levels.
Yeah. You see the injustice of it all. They had intel about Japanese submarines in the area, but failed to relay that information to McVeigh. They didn't properly track the ship's position, and they ignored distress signals, not even realizing the Indianapolis was missing until days later.
And how did Captain McVeigh cope with all of this? I mean, the weight of those lost lives, the unfairness of the court-martial.
Sadly, he carried that burden for years. The guilt, the sense of injustice, it eventually became too much. He took his own life in 1968. It's a tragic end to a story that already had so much tragedy.
Right. It just seems so wrong. A man who dedicated his life to, serving his country.
Yeah.
Who faced, unimaginable circumstances, only to be condemned by the very, institution he served.
Yeah, it's a classic example of scapegoating, unfortunately. Blaming an individual to, deflect attention.
Right.
From, systemic failures.
Right.
But thankfully, the story of the USS Indianapolis.
Well.
And if, Captain McVeigh doesn't end there.
Okay, so tell me about this sixth grader, Hunter Scott.
Yeah.
Who, got involved. I read that he really was instrumental in getting McVeigh's name cleared.
It's quite remarkable. In the early 1990s, Hunter, he chose the Indianapolis sinking as the subject for a school history project. But he went far beyond a simple research paper. He interviewed survivors, studied naval records, and even managed to track down and correspond with Matsura Hashimoto, the Japanese submarine commander who had sunk the Indianapolis.
Wow. Talk about taking initiative. It's amazing to think that a young student could have such an impact on a historical event. What was Hashimoto's response? I mean, after all those years, how did he feel about the Indianapolis sinking?
Well, Hashimoto had always maintained that McVeigh was not to blame for the, loss of the ship. Yeah. He even testified in McVeigh's defense at the court-martial, arguing that the sinking was a result of, wartime circumstances, not any negligence on McVeigh's part.
So he was willing to stand up for McVeigh,
yes,
even though they were former enemies.
Yes, and not only that, but Hashimoto also wrote this letter to the U.S. Senate urging them to exonerate McVeigh. He felt strongly that the captain had been unfairly blamed and that the historical record needed to be corrected.
It's incredible to think about a former enemy advocating for justice for an American captain. That speaks volumes about Hashimoto's character.
It does. And his letter, along with the efforts of the survivors, McVeigh's family, and of course, Hunter Scott, ultimately led to McVeigh's posthumous exoneration in 2000. It's a long time coming, but justice was finally, served.
It's a reminder that sometimes truth and justice can prevail, even if it takes, decades. And the dedication of people from all walks of life, including, a determined sixth grader. Is there anything else about the Indianapolis story? It seems like something you'd read about in a history book. But hearing the details like this really brings it to life.
Well, there's one final detail that really underscores the power of reconciliation. In 2005, for the 60th anniversary of the sinking, Hashimoto's daughter and granddaughter attended this memorial event in Indianapolis. They offered their condolences and support to the survivors.
That's incredible. After all that happened, to just have that kind of gesture of empathy and understanding, it's truly moving. What do you think is the most important takeaway from these stories?
For me, it's the reminder that human experience is full of, contradictions. We see ambition and ruthlessness in the Woodward case, but also resilience in the fight for justice in the story of the USS Indianapolis. And ultimately, I think both stories highlight the importance of challenging assumptions, digging deeper into the narratives we're presented with and seeking understanding, even in the face of, tragedy.
It's such a powerful message, and it resonates with what we try to do here on the Deep Dive. Encourage curiosity.
Yeah.
Explore different, perspectives.
Yeah.
And leave you with something to think about long after the episode ends.
Exactly. And sometimes those explorations can lead to, unexpected connections, like finding parallels between a high society scandal and a World War II naval disaster.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into two captivating and thought-provoking stories. And for those listening, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more fascinating explorations like this one. We'll see you next time.